All right, well, we'll go ahead and we'll dive in then. We are in our series, I Am, talking about some different characteristics of who we are through Christ. And we are on week 6 already, week 6 of 7. So we'll take a break next week for Pastor Sam to come and share. And then that first week there in November, we'll wrap it up. So this week, we are looking at I am creative. So we've looked at how I am holy, righteous, loved, secure, confident, and now creative. And this one, I'll be honest, this is probably the hardest one for me as I was sitting down to write it because I don't consider myself a creative person. I'm not. That's okay. But after writing this, I feel I am much more creative. God just changed my perspective. So I'm hoping that if you're sitting here going, Pastor Jake, I hear you saying that God says I'm creative, and I'm here to tell you that that is wrong. Hopefully God will speak to you like he spoke to me, and at the end of this, you'll be going, I am creative. So often when we think of creative, though, we think of the arts, painting, drawing, all those things you do as kindergartners and preschoolers and maybe into first grade before they start telling you that you just have to write all the time. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's kind of when we think back to of when we were most creative for some of us. And some of us continued that, and you're still phenomenal artists or writers or painters or whatever medium you use. But some of us did not continue on those things. Oftentimes, Abby and I will talk about it. She likes to do some different art crafts and that, and she'll be like, Jake, why don't you want to do this with me? And I let her know I don't like doing art crafts anymore because the picture in my head is not what comes out, and that frustrates me, and it irritates me, and so I don't want to live with that frustration and irritation, so I just won't do them. That's okay. But before we get too far into this, anyone here who considers yourself a creative person, just raise your hand. I want to know how many people. I've got a few. I got some who are like, yeah, depending on the time of day. All right. I get it. Awesome. So we have quite a few people who say they're creative, but I also saw quite a few people who looked me in the eyes and were like, you're not talking to me. I'm not creative. I get it. Like I said, I am with you. Until I wrote this sermon, I would not have raised my hand. And I still struggle to do that just because it's a habit now. But we are creative because God is creative. And so we're going to look at that a little bit, and we're going to really dive into it more. We've got plenty of scriptures we're going to go through. All except for the last 2 scriptures are completely dealing with the point that we're creative because God's creative. So let's dive into it. First of all, we're going to go all the way back to the beginning, and by the beginning I mean John 1 through 4. Because in the beginning, the Word already existed. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. He existed in the beginning with God. God created everything through him, and nothing was created except through him. The Word gave life to everything that was created, and his life brought light to everyone. So as we've read this before, we know that the Word here is talking about Jesus. So in the beginning, Jesus already existed. He was with God, and he was God. He existed with God. But God created everything through Jesus and for Jesus. Now, if you create something through something else, what does that mean? If I create something through sculpting, that means it's a sculpture. There's clay in it, right? So if we're being created through God, through Jesus, then that means we have Jesus in us. He's a part of us. Well, I think it was pretty creative for God to look at the world and go, I made this whole thing. This is really cool, but I got to add people. I got to add mankind. And so if he's a part of us, and we're looking at that, then that means we have his creativity in us. The God who created the heavens and the earth, the God who created all of nature, every human being, every culture that would come up came about because of him. That's pretty creative. That means we're creative because he's in us. See, Genesis 1:27 tells us, so God created human beings in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. If we are created in his image and we are created through him, then that means we are doubly blessed with his creativity. Because like we talked about, if we're created through him, we've got him in us. He's involved in us. But at the same time, if he creates us in his image, then that means we are a part of him. We can see this so often with kids. As we raise kids, we raise them to be like us, but at the same time better than us, right? I'm doing my best to try to get Evangelina to learn dad jokes. It's not going so well since she won't speak English yet, but I'm working on it. As time goes on, I know she'll get to the point where, like Everett, she's picking up on that. There's been a few times now where Everett has said stuff, and it's like, that did not come from mom and dad. That came from an uncle. Sometimes it's Josh, like when he's telling my daughter to not be a wuss. It's like she just fell and hit her head. I think she can be a little bit of a wuss. I'm getting off topic. But we see that with kids where we try to instill in them part of who we are. We want to make them somewhat in our image. Like I said, we want to make them better. God tries to make us in his image, to raise us in his image. And there are times where kids are rebellious and they choose not to do so, don't they? There are times where God is trying to make us in his image and we choose not to do so. But at the same time, we have that ability, we have that knowledge. We just have to let ourselves accept it and use it and grow in it. If we are created in his image and he's creative, then so are we. Psalm 139, 13 through 14 says, you made all the delicate inner parts of my body and knit me together in my mother's womb. Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous, how well I know it. See, if he knit us together, that means he spent some time on us. Abby is crocheting a blanket right now. She's done that for pretty much every baby that's been born since we've been together. She'll crochet him a little baby blanket. So she's working on the one now for Jethro. And as she does that, this might surprise you, but it's not done instantaneously. She's been working on it for a while. I used to knit. I've forgotten how now. But when I would knit something, it takes time. And if it's me, I don't know how Abby can do it, but she can crochet without looking at what she's doing. I can't. When I would knit, I had to focus on the knitting. I was paying attention to how I was looping that yarn and everything. And that's the way God did us. See, he could do like Abby and do it without looking, but he's going, no. This is my masterpiece. I'm taking my time. I am making sure that every little piece is perfectly in place. I'm not saying that her crocheting is bad. That might have come off that way. Her crocheting's great. But you can tell when she gets to the difficult part, she focuses a little bit more. See, when God was working on us, he focused on us. He spent time making us just the way he wanted us. And oftentimes, we are way more complex than we think. A lot of us try to go, hey, I'm a simple person. I just need this and this. For me, a nap every once in a while and food. I'm good. Turn the TV on occasionally. I don't need much else. Some of us try to say that, but then when we get that life, all of a sudden, that's not quite enough. When I was single, that's all I did. Go home, take a nap, watch some TV, make a pizza. It was a good life for the first couple days. like, man, I'm bored. I miss people. What am I supposed to do? See, I was finding out there was more to me than I thought. And sometimes when we are looking at ourselves, there's more to us than we think because we are a complex workmanship. See, verse 14 says, "Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex." We are not simple creatures. There is more to us. But the verse ends with, "Your workmanship is marvelous, how well I know it." There are times where we need to stop and get to know ourselves. Because when we are talking about how we are creative, for some of us, we don't consider ourselves creative. The reason for that being is most of the time the world tells us creative is you're making things of art, right? I was looking up different definitions to make sure that I was getting a good one, and one literally said that being creative, is being able to bring something forth, especially in the arts. I didn't like that definition. I liked Merriam-Webster's a lot better, where it said, creative is marked by the ability or power to make or produce something. Marked by the ability or power to create or do something. See, when we look at that, it suddenly has a little different meaning. It changes it. But we have to know ourselves to know where we're creative. Ephesians 2:10 tells us, "For we are God's masterpiece. He's created us anew in Christ Jesus so we can do the good things He planned for us long ago." See, God created us for His plan. He's got plans for us. We have to be open to them. This is kind of going back to the being a child and letting ourselves be made in His image. Sometimes we're rebellious, and so when He has these plans come up, we choose to go a different way. But if we follow the plan He has for us, then we're creative because that's the way He's planned for us to be. See, it doesn't always mean that if we're going to do something, we have to do it with different forms of traditional art medium. Minnesota District and the AG in general does a fine arts festival for youth. As part of that, when I first heard it, I was thinking it was only for people who, paint and draw and sing and take pictures, photography. I'm struggling to remember some easy words today. Forgive me. Earlier I forgot tithe. My wife didn't let me forget that one. But when I first heard it, I was thinking of all of those. So I was extremely surprised when the youth pastor was like, "Jake, are you going to participate?" I kind of giggled, and I was like, "No, I'm not good at any of that." And he goes, "Well, they've got an entire section on preaching." They have a section on preaching? Yeah, they got a section on that and spoken word, and he starts going through all these things, and it's like, that's art? Huh, never thought of it that way. And you see, sometimes that's the way we are. We hear these words, and we're like, I'm not creative because I'm not good at drawing. I'm not good at painting. And God's going, no, creativity is different. That's why in Romans 12, 6 through 8, Paul writes, "In His grace, God has given us different gifts for doing certain things well. So if God has given you the ability to prophesy, speak out with as much faith as God has given you. If your gift is serving others, serve them well. If you are a teacher, teach well. If your gift is to encourage others, be encouraging. If it is giving, give generously. If God has given you leadership ability, take the responsibility seriously. And if you have a gift for showing kindness to others, do it gladly." Creative doesn't just mean in the arts. We can be creative in all kinds of ways. You want to see some creativity? Check out the janitor's closet up here. That was part of Abby's project yesterday. I emptied it out. I'm good at emptying stuff out and throwing it away. I am not good at putting it back in a way that it looks better than when I tore it out. She is. Check out the janitor closet up here. You want to see organized and awesome? Check out the basement one. That's where Chloe and Jeb and Michelle and others were working. It's a lot bigger. You can fit more people in there. They did an awesome job. It looks phenomenal. They're great at organizing. Not so much. Abby can confirm that this isn't just with closets, it's with pretty much everything. Although, strangely enough, computers, I can keep those organized. But sometimes we're creative in how we solve problems. You've heard about that. Creative problem solvers. That's getting to be more and more of a common phrase as we come across more and more complex problems in our world. People are looking for creative problem solvers to handle the fact that you can't hire anyone, that you can't get supplies, that all this stuff is going on. Where they're like, we need creative problem solvers. And some of us are going, yeah, that's not my forte either. I can't draw, I can't do that. I can get the job done. One year for Christmas, my grandparents gave me, it's not Legos, it's K'NEX. It's kind of like a mixture of Legos and Lincoln Logs. It was a pinball machine. The one flipper kept getting stuck. I made a solution. It was ugly, but it did the job. It kept that from getting stuck. See, some of us, we can get the job done, but it's not creative. It's not pretty. A creative problem solver would have figured out a way to where you would have never noticed that wasn't part of it. My solution, you looked at that and you went, what's the weird growth there? Some of us, we're creative in how we communicate. It might be through preaching. It might be through writing. Could be phone calls, text messages. I know one of Abby's sisters sent her two pigeons one time as emojis. I'm like, what does that mean? Pigeon, pigeon? She said, no. What sound do pigeons make? Coo. Yeah, it's cuckoo. Like cool. That's creative to me. I look at that and I go, two birds, where's the one stone? What are they talking about? No, it meant cool. There are some times now, especially where we see like different emojis come up and you look at them and you're like, I now understand that this is how hieroglyphics worked. We're reverting back into using pictures. It's okay. Some of us are creative in how we do that. Some of us are not. There are some people who are super creative in making food. We've watched some cooking shows and they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to take this and mix it with this and do this. And I'm sitting there going, that sounds horrible. And then they're like, oh yeah, and then I do this, and it comes out and it's like, I'd eat that. Some of us are creative in how we do our jobs. There's tons of different ways we can be creative. Some of us are creative in who we keep as friends because we know that we're not creative in a bunch of different ways. So if I'm creative with being friends with that person and that person and that person, then I've got an expert all the time. It'll be very helpful whenever you get in one of these game shows where you have the phone a friend. I guess I'm creative in how I think of that. We'll go with it. But God gave us different gifts to be creative in. We shouldn't think we aren't creative just because we don't have creativity in other areas where others do, or we're creative in areas where others aren't. Our creativity is not based on those around us. It's based on the one who made us. And so when we realize that and we understand that our creativity is dependent on Him, it should change the way we see the world. Now, I'm not saying that you need to be able to go home now and be creative in all these different ways. No, God gave us different gifts. I'm not expecting everyone to be able to go home and play the piano as well as Marla and Megan. I'm not expecting people to be able to sing as well as the worship team. I'm not expecting you to be able to preach as well as me. Some of you can preach a lot better than me, you just don't want to. That's okay. What I'm asking you to do is to go home and say, God, if I don't consider myself a creative person, where am I creative? Where did you give me creativity? Every one of us has an area where we're creative. Sometimes, like we talked about, we're just too wonderfully complex, and we need to spend a little bit of time with our Maker to figure it out. It's amazing now to look at some of these instruction manuals for how to do stuff and see just how complex they are and what kind of features are hidden. But if we spend time with the instruction manual, we can do these different items. God created us. Our instruction manual is the Bible. If we spend time in the manual, if we spend time speaking with the Creator, then He is going to show us all of our features. He's going to show us how we can be creative. And our creativity will allow us to reach others. There are so many people that I have met who, because of the creativity they had, they were able to reach groups that I never would be able to. We had a guy out in Detroit. Does anybody remember Tech Decks? It's like skateboards for your fingers. He had people coming to church because he played Tech Deck with them. I'm not talking like a 12-year-old or anything. This was like a 25, 26-year-old man playing Tech Decks with his other 20, 30-year-old friends and bringing them to church. That's pretty creative. Some of you are part of book groups. You're a part of, quilting clubs, knitting clubs. You go to different art classes. You go to different events and things like that. Why can't you reach out? I was doing an interview and I had a guy comment on my tattoo. All of a sudden, I was able to have a conversation based on the creativity of somebody else that they put in my skin. Completely unrelated to the interview. But there are going to be times where they're going to see things in our lives and they're going to comment on them, and all of a sudden there's that door. And we can be creative with taking that door and turning it around to showing them the door to Jesus. Right? That's why Colossians 3:23 says, "Work willingly at whatever you do, as though you were working for the Lord rather than for people." It's because you are working for the Lord. When we're doing something, we need to remember that. We are working for God. We are working to bring people closer to Him. And so when we look at this entire series and we look at how we're holy, righteous, loved, secure, confident, creative, they all play together for the purpose of bringing people in to God's kingdom. The question is, are you and I going to be open to letting God's creativity flow through us to use those opportunities? Because as we talked about in Sunday school this morning, people look at us and they're watching us. They're trying to figure out, what's this Christianity about? What are these Christians about? And so when things happen, they're watching, and sometimes they'll approach us. Going through a hard time in your life, but you're not destroyed, you're not broken down, you're not just annihilated, and they're going to come up and go, how are you still able to function? You've got this and this and this and this and this going on. I'd be a puddle on the floor. And we're able to speak to who God is. See, some of us have creativity in the arts, and we can make wonderful pieces, whether it's songs, whether it's paintings, whether it's writing stories or sermons, and some of us are creative in the ways that we're able to share the gospel. Some of us are creative at showing God's love through a meal. Some of us are creative in being able to just sit and listen and bring it back to Jesus when given the opportunity. Some of us can make crafts to bless those around us. Creativity isn't in short supply. The people that are willing to use it for the kingdom, though, they're getting in short supply. The question is, will we step up to take the place and start serving in our own way, creatively? We're going to get done a little bit early. But let's spend some time in prayer, just asking God, where am I creative? Maybe you already know. Then ask him, God, how can I be using my creativity to bless others, to introduce them to you? Let's pray. God, we love you so much. You are so awesome. God, the creativity you have shown from the time where you even, before you created the heavens and the earth, when you were just planning it, and all of a sudden you spoke into existence everything, and then brought about time and time again more of your creativity. From the formation of the world to the creatures and the plants living in it, to the galaxy around this earth, to the humans that you created. God, you knit us together. You took time on us. You poured your creativity into each one of us in different ways. So God, we just ask, if we don't know where we're creative, that you would speak to us today. Lord, point out where we're creative. Whether it's a traditional sense of the word, as the world knows it, or whether it's you speaking into our hearts now going, no, you're creative in this way. God, speak to us. Even if we already think we know it, Lord, let us know if there's more. Show us all the different creativity that you put in us. And Lord, show us how we can use that for your glory. Give us your creative thoughts right now, Lord, on how we can take those items and we can channel them to bring people to you, that we can introduce them to you, that we can show them the creative God. Lord, let your Spirit fill each one of us, making us more like you, more and more creative as time goes on. God, I pray for each and every person here that you would be filling them with your presence, not just right now, but throughout the week, Lord, that you would be showing them different ways. Continue to speak to them, Lord, that in moments where they have an opportunity, that you would give them that creativity to take that step that you have for them. Lord, bless them and use them. Help them to reach out to the people around them. Help them to share your love. God, we love you so much. And we just pray that our creativity would grow. Thank you, Lord. Pray all of this in your name. Amen. Amen.